President-elect Donald Trump announced this morning that he will soon formally relinquish control of his business empire. Mr. Trump tweeted that he will be holding a major press conference on December 15th to announce that he will be leaving his business in order to, and I quote, fully focus on running the country, end quote. He went on to write that it is, quote, visually important as president to in no way have a conflict of interest with my various businesses, end quote. Now, this comes as the president-elect continues to fill his cabinet. His transition team announced yesterday that Congressman Tom Price is Mr. Trump's choice for Health and Human Services Secretary, and former Labor Secretary Elaine Chao is his pick to head the Department of Transportation. Sources also tell CBS News that the president-elect will nominate Steve Mnuchin as Treasury Secretary and billionaire investor Wilbur Ross as Commerce Secretary. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump sat down again last night with 2012 Republican presidential nominee Mitt Romney, who's said to be a leading contender for the as-yet unfilled position of Secretary of State. Afterwards, Romney spoke rather glowingly about a man he had previously called a phony and a fraud during the campaign.
I've had a wonderful evening with President-elect Trump. We had another discussion about affairs throughout the world, and these discussions I've had with him have been enlightening and interesting and engaging. I've enjoyed them very, very much. I was also very impressed by the remarks he made on his victory night. By the way, it's not easy winning. I know that myself. He did something I tried to do and was unsuccessful in accomplishing. He won the general election, and he continues with a message of inclusion and bringing people together. And his vision is something which obviously connected with the American people in a very powerful way.
And Major Garrett now joins us from Washington to discuss it all. Major, I do want to get to those tweets from Mr. Trump regarding his businesses in just a bit. But to what we just heard there from Mitt Romney, really the sort of praise, I suppose, one would expect, leaving what might have been a second job interview. But from what you've heard, how does Mr. Trump see things at this point as it regards Mitt Romney?
Josh, let me be very honest. This is a very difficult story to cover in the Trump transition because there are camps within Trump's transition team who have various favorites. And as you talk to each member of that camp, you get an interpretation tinged or through the prism of their advocacy of one of the three final contenders for Secretary of State, either Rudy Giuliani or Mitt Romney or former CIA Director David Petraeus. So it's very hard to get at what Trump is actually thinking. Harder still to get at what he is ultimately going to do. I've talked to members of the transition team who really don't know when or what Trump is going to do about this pick. And they do gather, as many of us have already, that President-elect Trump likes the drama, likes the intrigue, likes the storyline being perpetuated here. Now, let's just take the Mitt Romney dinner in isolation for a moment and talk about why it is significant. It would not have happened had Trump not driven the process himself. And it would not have happened had Romney not been given assurances that it would be a meeting of substance about dealing with the Secretary of State vacancy and possibly having Romney fill it. These two gentlemen had their one meeting for the cameras at Bedminster, New Jersey. They did the bare minimum required for the unity picture. This is definitely a follow-up conversation, a much deeper dive into what's possible, what Romney's willing to do, his loyalty test, if given one by President-elect Trump, et cetera, et cetera. So I can't tell you where this is going to land. I can tell you with some degree of confidence there'll be no announcement on Secretary of State today, and this could well bleed over into next week. But the advocacy for Giuliani continues within the Trump transition team. It continues for David Petraeus, and it continues for Romney. And this may be a situation where the last one in is the one who's picked, or Trump comes to a determination largely away from these various pressures and various job interviews. I just can't give you an idea of when that's going to happen.
And so the storyline is stoked, if nothing else. Meanwhile, as those deliberations continue to play out, yesterday we did see a handful of cabinet choices announced. When you looked in at the picks thus far, the cabinet he has thus far built, what is there to infer from them in terms of priorities?
Look, there's no way to summarize a cabinet for any president-elect in one or two words, but let me just give you a couple of dimensions by which I think you can judge the picks so far. One, if you are well-known and well-vetted in your career by the Vice President-elect Mike Pence, who's driving many of these personnel choices within the transition, you're in very good stead. Almost all of the people who have landed positions have gone through the vetting process conducted by Vice President-elect Pence or had a pre-existing relationship, legislative or otherwise, with Pence. A couple of exceptions to that are announcements that we confirmed yesterday, and I broke the Wilbur Ross Commerce Secretary pick myself. Those are people that have been known to Trump for a good long while, have a solid personal relationship with him, and in that sense, he was not reliant on Pence for advice or counsel about their abilities to carry out certain goals. Pence provided that on HHS Secretary Tom Price, member of Congress from Georgia, friend, ideological ally of Pence. He did so on UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, governor of South Carolina, who Pence knew for many years, worked that deal out on the side last week at the Republican Governors Association meeting in Orlando. Mike Pompeo, CIA director, member of Congress, someone that Pence knew. So in that respect, Pence drives a lot of this. But if you have a longstanding friendship with Trump and he trusts you and wants you to be an advocate for him and him alone, you're in very good stead as well. That's Mnuchin as Treasury Secretary and Wilbur Ross at Commerce. So I would say broadly, those are the two categories, the Pence wing and the Trump personal friendship wing, not suggesting in any way that they are clashing or will clash. These are just two of the dynamics driving the cabinet picks so far.
And I want to get you out of here on this one, Major. Again, about the announcement this morning via Twitter. Mr. Trump says he plans to give up control of his business empire. Was this expected?
Well, not based on what Trump has said publicly. It is something that the transition team did expect, so let me pull that apart a little bit. Last week in a session with the New York Times, President-elect Trump was emphatic, saying federal law required him to do nothing and that there could never be a conflict of interest where the President of the United States was concerned. And generally speaking, that is consistent with the longstanding interpretation of federal law. That's what he was saying publicly. Privately, even at that very time, he was ordering his lawyers to figure out a way to separate himself from his business holdings, not only here in the United States, but there are business holdings and connections in more than 20 countries around the globe. Josh, what we don't know is how extensive this separation is going to be. And if it is going to be a blind trust, does he sell all interest in every business operation he has? Or does he merely say, I'm out of it and my children are in charge? If he does that, Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared Kushner, is either going to be in the West Wing as an advisor to President Trump, or he's going to be in New York also as an advisor, just an informal one. These kind of relationships can create conflicts of interest if there are not huge walls of legal separation between Trump and his business empire. That we don't know. We're to get details December 15th at a press conference in New York. One thing I'm told by transition officials that's important in this conversation, Josh, Trump will not at that press conference be releasing his federal income tax returns, which would provide one roadmap, possibly the best roadmap, to all of his financial holdings and those who may hold loans for various Trump business enterprises, also part of a potential conflict of interest conversation.
So as many questions perhaps to be answered come December 15th, many more still left unanswered. Major Garrett there, as always, we do appreciate it.
Sure.